Well, howdy. We get to talk about a Bengals win here on the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, and that's exciting. There were some really fun things about Monday night's game with the Bengals going up against the Commanders. There were some things that kind of shined the light on continued frustrations, be it on or off the field, and now the Bengals are 1-1 in the preseason. A lot of fun watching Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow go at it a little bit, I guess, for a portion of the quarter. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some free agent visits, some, I guess, latest stuff on Trey Hendrickson, and much more about the Bengals defense in particular. I am Anthony. He is John. This is the Orange and Black Insider, brought to you in part by FOCO, the fans only company, and our newest partner, FanDuel. We are excited to be, we got all this star power behind us now, John. I feel like, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it.
Great. I think, I remember our past sponsors of the past, they were around for some pretty good Bengals seasons, if I recall. So
yeah,
we're kind of getting that mojo back. And also the last time the Bengals did win a preseason game was right before 2022. Last time they made the playoffs. They won a preseason game. They won a game. Why not? Why not celebrate just a smidgen, just a smidgen?
Man, phrasing it that way is really odd, because you couple that with the team's early season struggles over the past, really throughout the entire Zach Taylor tenure. You go, man, we don't get to see wins from the Bengals very often through August or September, it seems like. So we'll take this one how we can get it. And the Bengals, again, defeat the Washington Commanders. There was some nice bounce back moments from a couple of players, a rise by one that may have ascended him to the final roster after kind of being a little bit of an afterthought. But a lot of things to like, still some things that need ironing out. And we're going to talk about it because the Bengals beat Washington 31-17. Both of these teams should be pretty good this next year, barring something unforeseen. They've got quality quarterbacks. They've got some good players throughout their roster. It's just a matter of, can they put it all together? Can they make that next leap? And it was fun to watch both those guys, like I said, Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow, go up against each other in this one. A lot of LSU connections all over the place with this one, which was kind of cool. But hey, look, say what you want. Joe Burrow, he's engineered 4 touchdown drives in his limited preseason work. And he went, personally speaking, I would have liked to have seen him out of there a little earlier on Monday night than he was out there. But he wanted to play with some of the other guys that were subbing in. That's okay. And he engineered another couple of touchdown drives for the Bengals, did so the week prior. So the first team offense, particularly Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Chase Brown, are looking really good right now.
Yeah, I would kind of agree. It's kind of still interesting seeing the Bengals be beneficiaries of flags that extend drives, which was the case on the first drive. I believe it was 2 major flags. One of them was just taking advantage of the hard count, which kind of good to bring that out in the preseason and maybe not waste a 4th down play call that teams can look back at in the regular season. So that extended the drive while also, testing the mettle and the composure of the offensive line, especially on the road, which is pretty rare. And then, chuck it up to Jamar Chase and watch Noah Igbenogany kind of panic there and bring the ball down to the goal line. It was kind of not as encouraging seeing the red zone offense kind of falter the way that it did on that first drive, but then running right behind Dylan Fairchild. It's been kind of a theme in these first 2 preseason games, and that's how Chase Brown scored his touchdown. I do agree in the sense it's kind of like a reactionary agreement for me with Burrow and his playing time, because I think 3 drives is about what I expected to see from him. It's just that when they involve him being ragdolled to the ground after him trying to extend plays, it's kind of a conflicting thing, because on one hand, you want him to test his internal clock. You want him to try to improvise the ways that he does so well in the heart of the season. On the other hand, I think that there still needs to be someone in his ear saying, it's August. Let's not take these hits like this. Like, let's go all the way up to the point where you get, horse collar tackle to the ground, on the same field that you, of course, tore your knee up 5 years ago, right? So there's a balance there that I think maybe myself and others assume that would be figured out in terms of him testing his internal clock and inviting pressure, inviting hits, while also making sure that once it gets to that point, get the ball out of your hands. Obviously, defenders, I don't know this actually. I thought that, with it being preseason, maybe they would go a little bit light on him, like the Bengals did on Jaden Daniels before.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
I guess the Commanders, they saw a free shot on Burrow and they took it. So I don't mind the amount of time that they played, but I do think there should have been more of an emphasis of saying, take it 99% of the way there, but don't take the sack. Just throw it away to avoid the hit.
Yeah, and especially when it's just not who Burrow is. I mean, whether it's an exhibition game or a regular season game, he's just going to try and make that play. But it got a little nerve-wracking, and it was already a little bit I was already going into the game a little bit cautious, because you had, who was it, Marcus Spears and others on Monday Night Countdown saying, I don't know why they're playing all these guys this often and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, man, you're already putting the bad juju stamp on this thing, right? Going into it. And then you have that. And then I think it also was accentuated because, like you said, there were long drives that he was out there, a couple 4th downs and that sort of thing. And so you go, man, okay, I like this. I like that he's getting time. I like that they're ironing out the kinks, but let's be smart about this as well. I doubt that we will see as much from a lot of these guys in the next game, but who knows? Joe Burrow seems open to play really as long as that's reasonable in this final preseason game. But overall, I think there's a lot of good things coming out of a lot of the major stars on offense. I think Charlie Jones is starting to really cement himself as a probably wide receiver 5. You saw some good stuff from Yoshi. Chase, of course, being Chase. And then, holy moly, Mitchell Tinsley. I mean, look, the guy was a transfer. He went to Penn State, and, I mean, he was a big school guy, just not a guy that you thought was maybe going to have a stamp on this team necessarily right away. But what a game by him, including that toe tap touchdown. He was also a big reason, and his own play included, but he was a big reason that Jake Browning looked a lot more sharp this time around, as opposed to the first game. So Mitchell Tinsley has made a name for himself, and he has. Joe Burrow was asked, I can't remember if it was after the game or during the game, but basically he kind of said, I hope he's played his way onto the 53-man roster at this point. So he may have played himself into that final receiver spot, or one of the final receiver spots there with his play. Like I said, you've got Yoshi, Jermaine Burton. That's kind of still all over the place there. I mean, there's a lot to digest there. But again, some of these guys at the back end of the receiving depth chart are playing pretty well.
Yeah, I think, and I'll get to Tinsley in a second, but I think it was encouraging. Zach said that Burrow wanted to get reps with the guys outside of Chase and T. And that's huge, because in past preseasons when Burrow wasn't available, it was hard for those guys to get quality reps with, the backups in, and you didn't see a lot from Jones and Yoshi and the rest of the guys who were scrapping to make the team. So it was nice to see quality reps from, the guys that are going to be counted on as ancillary pieces, and also, giving them exposure and giving them quality tape to actually make the team. And while Tinsley, I don't think Burrow threw him a pass. I think that was all Jake Browning. Man, he was getting noise from the early days of training camp, but it was he was kind of going back and forth between him and Isaiah Williams, and it seemed like that was the true battle if they were going to keep 6 receivers, because there's still this whole dynamic about how do you treat Mike Gesicki on this depth chart? Is he actually just a wide receiver? Do they go deep at tight end or anything like that? But if Jermaine Burton isn't screwing up and not, screwing up his way off the team, and Charlie Jones is healthy and playing well, and the top 3 is there, you pretty much have to keep 6 at this point because like Mitchell Tinsley deserves to be on the roster, and he deserves to be on the Bengals roster because even if they are stacked at receiver, you can never have too many because of how valuable they are to the way that this offense is constructed and is orchestrated. And you just have to reward players like that who put in all the work in training camp to earn opportunities like this in the preseason. And wow, just what a game against his former team too. Like obviously the Commanders signed him as an undrafted free agent. He basically never really saw the field in his first 2 years there. And he really quietly joined this team all the way back in February on just a futures contract. I don't believe that really any outlets besides like us and like Cincy Jungle really reported that. When doing like all my roster breakdown pieces this offseason, I gave him a 10% chance of making the team. That's why you never put 0% chance because you never know how the preseason is going to happen for these guys. So shout out Mitchell Tinsley for really just taking advantage of the throws that came his way.
Absolutely. Showed a lot of balance, a lot of concentration. There was also that one that came back. I think it was a tip ball play that he tipped it, I think, to himself or something like that, dove and caught it. So showed a lot of different elements to his game that could benefit the Bengals offense for sure. You go around, and Tanner Hudson had the big game last week. He kind of had some struggles this week. But overall, the Bengals offense is putting up points. The starters and guys who are reserves, but should get some time. They're contributing for the most part. There've been a couple little speed bumps in the way there, but for the most part, they're getting it into the end zone. Last night, Monday night wasn't always the prettiest in terms of how some of those drives were sustained. You mentioned they maybe caught a couple breaks from penalties, that sort of thing, but that's football, and you got to take advantage of those opportunities when they come your way. So kudos to them. It was a mixed bag at best for the defense. The first team defense, when Jaden Daniels was in there, did he even throw a pass on that first try? I think he just ran it. Huge holes were opened up for running backs and Jaden Daniels to make plays. They marched right down the field after the Bengals marched down the field and got a touchdown. They marched right down the field and answered that right away. So that was kind of deflating, but you did see a couple of nice turnovers. Tyson Anderson, preseason hero for I don't know how many years now. He had an interception, as well as Barrett Carter looking the part. It's kind of odd because some people are saying, maybe Carter needs to be out there with some of the stars. I know our buddy, I think it was the coach, Matt Minnick, who kind of said, maybe you go with Burks and Barrett Carter as your starting linebackers along with Logan Wilson out there instead of, Knight and some of the others that we've kind of seen struggle a little bit. But regardless, there is a real yin and yang with this defense, and in particular Monday night. It was pretty bad all night in the first game, but this one they were able to create some turnovers. They were able to do some different things, but still they look like they are not very capable against the run at this point, and they give up big plays.
Yeah, it didn't seem like they were prepared for all of the the trap locks and the guard counters and the pulling that Washington really pulled out there, even though that's just kind of how that offense operates. And yeah, like Demetrius Knight and TJ Slaton are, I think, who people should have their eyes on right now. It's not necessarily surprising that Knight is struggling as a rookie starter. I think the surprise is because he's been a starter in this defense since OTAs, and there was a lot of hype about him, like warranted hype during training camp and everything. He just doesn't look quite ready for this role, at least based off these past 2 games. He's very slow to his run fits. He's just not aggressive and physical at the point of attack. And TJ Slaton at nose tackle is just not making the impact that you want him to make as of yet. Obviously, Chris Jenkins is still out there against double teams, and that's just not where he should thrive. So I think offenses are still keying in on him. But if you're wondering why this defense looks the same as it did last year, it's because like Knight was the big addition at linebacker to replace Jermaine Pratt, and Slaton was the big addition to replace the nose tackle that they didn't even have last year. And neither one of them are making the impact that they need to make in terms of just making this defense look competent, because they're just getting gashed in similar ways as of last year because the additions that they made just haven't really produced any fruit yet. So again, it's still very early days. I think it was weird how confident that Zach Taylor was talking about it after the game, saying, no, like I like our defense. I like where we're at. And obviously, again, it's still preseason. You don't want to give everything away, but it didn't seem like what was happening last night was a result of them hiding stuff from the playbook. It just seemed like they were just getting blown off the ball like they were doing so all year last year.
That's my worry. That's my worry. Yeah, I mean, some people are saying, yeah, it's vanilla. You're not going to do a lot of it. Yeah, that's true. But like you said, point of attack for some of these guys was a major problem on Monday night. And, when Washington steps out on the field and they rip off, I don't even know how many yards that first run was, right off the bat. And then Jaden Daniels cruises into the end zone. We did mention, some people are saying, what was Jordan Battle doing? But I think there was maybe a little bit of a business decision and courtesy there to Jaden Daniels. But regardless, again, it was when the backup quarterbacks came in that the Bengals defense, and granted they are backups as well, but that's when some of the plays were being made, not by this quote unquote first unit. And of course, all of this gets accentuated with Trey Hendrickson's absence and all kinds of different things going on. We'll talk about that more in just a minute, but still, John, I don't know. I'm kind of with you where I'm like, these are the same problems with some new faces out there that we've seen really since 23. I mean, if you can go back a few years now, the shoddy tackling and inability to stop the run and that sort of thing. I mean, these have been problems for years now. And with week 1 coming up in just a little bit here, these things have to get remedied really quickly.
Yeah, it's just the more that you look at it, the more that you realize that if this defense is going to be the version that it needs to be for this team to make the playoffs, they're just going to have to go through all these growing pains. And it probably will leak into the regular season. How long into the regular season remains to be seen. But I think it's pretty clear at this point that they're not going to be a completely improved unit, even against the corpse of Joe Flacco week 1, who's been announced as the starting quarterback for the Browns when September 7th rolls around. You got the Jags and Trevor Lawrence the next week. You got some other playoff teams following that. So they can't take forever to really, strap up and just, look like the improved defense that they need to be. But I think that's the reality that's setting in. Yes, there's progress in some areas, but when you are on the field and you have a new offense out there that's not the offense that you faced for the last month in training camp, you're going to see different things, and you're going to face against different guys who are just more talented than you. And that's the real problem that they have to overcome. They have to be greater than like the individual parts of that defense. That like the sum has to be greater than the individual parts. And that could take a while. That could take into October, November, which is why it's so important for this offense to be the true unit that starts fast this year. And that's why there was such an emphasis on making sure that the starting offense was out there for the first 2 weeks of the preseason. All the pressure is going to be on them to basically carry this defense until maybe in the middle of the season they finally get things figured out.
Hopefully it doesn't take that long. But yes, it does seemingly make more sense now on a number of different levels that the Bengals offense is playing a bit more in the preseason and looking pretty sharp. Going back to that side of the ball, Dylan Fairchild is scoring out very, very well on PFF and playing very, very well. So that is good to see. We've talked about the mixed bag a little bit from the tight end position, but the wide receiver position looks pretty deep. The rest of the offensive line looks pretty decent, I would say right now. I think there was a penalty against Teddy last night early on too. But I mean, for the most part, the main cast of characters on offense looks pretty good and in a better spot heading into the regular season, but more remains to be seen here in the final game. We may not see much of these guys in that final game. We'll see, but Bengals win 31-17. There's some good, some bad, some ugly, some rebounds, all kinds of different stuff with that game, but Bengals get in the win column, and that is good to see. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Believe, BLEAV podcast network, and the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. So you can go to your favorite audio streamer, find the Believe in Cincy, BLEAV, and CINCY is how you spell those tricky words, and subscribe to our show, the channel with 4 shows. Our show, Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends, the coach, Matt Minnick and Willie Lutz, and Matt and Willie No Ball, as well as 3 and Out. If you like to see our beautiful smiling faces while we do this, you can check out our YouTube channel where you can also get the 3 and Out shows on there as well. But regardless of how you check us out, we appreciate it, and we appreciate the support from FanDuel as well as FOCO. FOCO is offering exclusive bobbleheads for pre-order. They've got a new Joe Burrow one out, so you got to go check that out. That link is in the show description, at least on our YouTube channel for now. I think Facebook is Cincy Jungle's Facebook as well, so check that out. And of course, you can make daily bets, all kinds of different stuff on FanDuel. You can bet on all kinds of wacky, crazy stuff and make yourself some money. Please gamble responsibly. Well, John, where did we say we were going to go next?
Speaking of gambles.
Yeah, I know. Where did we say we were going to go next? I think we were going to talk more about the defense. Is that where we were going on that?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the defense. Look, how are you feeling about? I know we've talked a little bit about the linebackers. Let's talk about the other elements of the defense, the defensive line and the secondary. What have you seen to this point that either points to optimism, more pessimism? I know we've talked about that Jordan Battle play, but that may be a non sequitur based on whatever was going on there. But regardless, how do you feel about the performance, especially with 2 interceptions last night, one of which was from the safety position?
I think Tommy Pennington in Facebook put it pretty aptly. Defense is awful. It's hard to disagree necessarily because right now, like it's not a finished unit without Trey. And the funny thing is, I don't know how much he could have impacted gap integrity last night to soften some of those large runs, but having the threat of a true quality pass rusher out there definitely helps because they just don't really have that without him. And it's already tough enough to defend the likes of, Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts and offenses of that nature that operate in a little bit different of a different way. But it's optimistic that Shamar Stewart's getting more exposure with the ones. I think that's great for him. Obviously, the opportunity opened up because Miles Murphy is out right now. He's week to week, but that's another thing that you have to monitor. You're hoping to get a jump from him in year 3. And right now, it's just Joseph Osai, who you could probably rely on the most for a consistent pass rush without Trey. And it's just been the problem of the entire offseason. Where is that pressure going to come from if it can't arrive schematically through the likes of Al Golden's pressure schemes and everything like that? We just haven't seen that yet. Obviously, I don't imagine he's going to unleash everything in the preseason, but you would like to see these guys win more one-on-ones, and we haven't quite seen that yet outside of, we've seen from training camp. I think there's been some promise in that regard with both McKinley Jackson and Chris Jenkins Jr., but again, you need to see more from the unit as a whole. We haven't seen much in terms of what the secondary is going to look like in its final form because Dax Hill and Cam Taylor are still working back. They played a little bit last night, obviously, but you didn't have Geno Stone. Tyson Anderson, like you said, I think just secured himself as like this year's Jordan Battle, where if there is issues with either safety, like he's probably next man up. That was great to see him obviously make another play on the ball. So I think they're okay there. I'm not too worried about Jordan Battle despite his tackling issues last night. But yeah, outside of like what we talked about with linebacker, there's just still a lot of unknowns here and guys that still need to step up because right now it's just not enough.
Yeah, I like what I saw in some of the reserves, but it's so hard when you talk about reserves in preseason games because they are going up against. So when I don't want to say it skews the grades, the PFF scores, all that kind of stuff, but there is kind of an asterisk to it a little bit because these aren't backups going up against starters for the most part. But I think Jong Meta and was it Shaka Hayward had a pretty decent evening. He had 6 tackles there, but regardless, I think we all unrealistically thought that this may be coming together. It would have been coming together quicker than it is right now. I think that's, and maybe it's an unrealistic expectations. Like you said, maybe they're not showing a lot, but on the flip side of that argument, with new faces, a lot of new people, a lot of new personnel on the defensive side of the ball, you want to maybe practice in a game situation some of those looks, some of those things, if he being Al Golden, indeed holding some of that stuff back. So kind of a double-edged sword there. I'm not super worried about it, but if we're talking about the same stuff come October, and the Bengals are, oh man, they're eking by teams 42-38, and that's where I go, okay, sustainability of this, it can't carry through another full year where the offense is carrying the defense. I'm really curious to see how all of the cornerback stuff shakes out and what the Bengals are going to do there. I know Dax is kind of he's back and resting and doing all kinds of different stuff, but I'm really curious about how that all ends up looking. But for right now, like you said, they're having a hard time generating a pass rush. In preseason, you're going to run, especially when you're using backup players, you're going to tend to run the ball a little bit more, which Washington did at least early on last night. So, it's hard to get a really good grasp on things right now, but when the struggles are there, particularly from the early unit, it's really worrisome.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to if they're in a situation where like they got to have a stop. I don't know how you have the confidence that they can do that now. Yeah. And there's still a sense that like, yeah, they give up explosive plays outside of the 20s. And then once they're inside the 20, I think they kind of collect themselves a little bit more, which was a definite theme from like the Lou and Narumo era. And I don't think that's necessarily gone away yet. But yeah, there's just so much unknown where I don't know how you can confidently say, relax, things will be better, when you just really don't know at this point, because there's just so much uncertainty with this unit. The fact that there just wasn't as much roster turnover as you probably would have thought there was going to be. Everything is relying on Al Golden. We've known this since January. It's the biggest bet that the Bengals have made. Everything is on him, changing everything for the better. And if you're just going to play it by the case of, we haven't seen anything yet. Well, okay, we haven't seen anything yet, which is why there's still a natural sense of skepticism until you have seen it. So they could absolutely shut the Browns out on September 7th with things that we just haven't seen yet, and they're just holding close to the vest. That's perfectly fine. It's not exactly what I'm expecting, but I think that's what they feel like is the plan. And if that's the case, then they'll probably win that game. But until that happens, I think it's very natural to be very uncertain right now.
So the Bengals made a lot of changes, at least in the linebacker room. Do you foresee them, and where would that be? Do you foresee them looking at final cuts for additional help in the secondary or the defensive line? Or do you think they just like what they have? They'll figure Trey out, and more on that in a second. They'll figure that out and, ride with that. Or do you think if there's maybe an enticing name out there and we could see another late surprise cut from the Bengals after they scour the waiver wire?
I think Myles Murphy's injury is something to monitor, considering it's week to week.
Yeah.
And now for about a week, that's a pretty important depth piece that they may not have for the start of the season. Again, way too early to determine, but they've made waiver claims at defensive end before. That's how Isaiah Thomas got here last year, and he's still on the roster as of this moment. So that's a position that I could see. Defensive tackle seems to be like there's this battle between Taven Bryan and McKinley Jackson. I don't know if McKinley Jackson is exactly on the roster bubble, but maybe his spot in the depth chart could be in question because of Bryan's presence. But that's also, I think, something to kind of watch for. Geno Stone did return to practice before the preseason game, but he just didn't practice enough in order to play. So I think he'll be fine for the regular season. So I'm not expecting a safety there, especially with Tyson Anderson is still playing particularly well this time of year. So I don't really know if there's any positions that I'm looking at that's outside like the defensive line. I think it just may depend on who is actually out there, who is able to be claimed. And it'll just have to be kind of a fluid situation there.
Well, the upside, even if they don't, the upside with the defense and even with the struggles, and this is more of a reminder than a revelation for everybody, but they've got a lot of athletic guys on that side of the ball. They have a lot of athletic guys on that side of the ball in the secondary. I mean, you mentioned Tyson Anderson, his RAS score is high. And I mean, you go across the board, there are a lot of Shamar Stewart, a lot of athletic guys there. I just think also when the defense, again, particularly the early units, are playing a certain way and not looking great, and you have Trey Hendrickson sitting there on the sidelines, it's just not a good look. It's not it doesn't inspire a lot of hope, particularly with some of the reports that we've been hearing. And I guess we can transition into that a little bit because the Bengals did make some headlines. You saw Trey Hendrickson all over the Monday Night Football cast on the sideline. He was talking to Duke Tobin before the game, which was an interesting tidbit. He was talking to players. He's, doing all kinds of different things, being as good of a teammate as he can be in a situation like this, I guess. But the latest reports, and I think it was via Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated, basically the Bengals have really upped the average annual value of whatever contract they're proposing to him, basically salary on a yearly basis. But, oh, John, those guarantees, it's just they will not step up to the plate on the guarantees. And that seems to be, again, the sticking point. Progress, it sounds like, has been made to a point, but now it's stalemate again. And when you see the defense, particularly the early unit, perform the way it did, and I know Trey Hendrickson isn't known as this fantastic, it's not like a Sam Hubbard or a Robert Gathers that's, this run defending savant per se, but when you see the defense just in general performing early the way that they did, and you see him on the sideline, you're kind of going, what are we doing here? What is going on?
They are lucky that he's not cheesing on the sideline and laughing his ass off. They're lucky that he's there in the first place wearing a Bengals logo. They are lucky that Trey is handling this like he is, because it's not a given for everyone in his shoe. And it sickens me that there are still people out there that are trying to diminish him while he is treating the situation like the way that it is. He understands the way that this team does business, and I think he understands that the way that this team does business definitely impacts the product on the field and the preparation to the regular season, and how unfortunate that is. But he genuinely wants to be here. The Bengals do want him to stay here, and this is just what they do. They wait until the final moment to see how much that they can get him to give in, and when push comes to shove, odds are he will give in to some extent, but it does him some good to wait out as long as possible in order to get the most actual money in this contract as possible.
Yeah.
It just hit me the other day. I don't really know how I didn't really think about this before, but we've known that they've upped the years to match the TJ Watts, the Max Crosbys. They've upped the average annual value to match what other edges have gotten this season. There are 16 non-quarterback contracts that average over $30 million a year or more. Every single one of them has significant guarantees. None of them are just pay as you go. Why are you offering a guy that contract if you're not going to include the guarantees? And why do you expect the guy who's receiving this offer to just go along with it and accept the fact that he's just this anomaly that is supposed to fall off after this year, even though he's shown no signs of doing that? It doesn't make any sense for Trey to just give in now and accept basically just a 1-year contract with 2 team options when no one else in his position making this kind of money has done that. I know there's people furiously typing in the comments, well, he's 30 years old and he plays a position where there's a lot of wear and tear and you never really know, and all this other stuff, right? But again, if that is his market, if that is his value, that is what the contract is supposed to look like. It's supposed to include guarantees. And of course, the Bengals are going to do everything in their power to make sure that that's not in there, because they refuse to evolve in this aspect.
Well, it's almost like they're thinking, well, he's shown such a penchant for the city of Cincinnati, and he has publicly expressed he loves playing here. He loves the teammates. He is being a good teammate to some degree by showing up and coaching guys on the sideline, that sort of thing. And they're almost seemingly using that against him, saying, well, he'll take the discounts on the guaranteed parts because he wants to be here. Well, that's just not how it works. If that's indeed the mindset, it's just not how it works. Like you said, it seems that they've upped their ante on certain elements, but not the major one that they always go kicking and screaming, being dragged towards, which is the guaranteed money. And you to me, if you witness last night and you witness the early defensive performance, I keep using that same phrase, I apologize. But if you witness that, and you see Trey Hendrickson in street clothes, who is there and trying to help out some of his teammates and that sort of thing, you just go, we just got to get this done. I mean, let's just get this done. And I just don't understand that. And then the Bengals also reportedly, I think it was Jordan Schultz, NFL insider, who had reported earlier this week that the Bengals then said, hey, we're fielding trade offers, that sort of thing. Personally, this is just me and my own jelly bean brain, but personally, I think that is a power play move more than actually sniffing out a viable trade. I think that is just another public thing to say, okay, well, we did this part. We upped the AAV. We upped the years of the contract, that sort of thing, but we're not coming to terms on the guarantees. So, hey, let's explore a trade again and see what happens. I just, that's my feeling. And I don't necessarily, if that is accurate, I don't really like that approach, but that's what was reported earlier this week.
Yeah, Jesse James, who is a certified NFLPA agent, I think he had a really good take on this. This is the Bengals' way, and this is speculation, but the Bengals could be floating this out there to let everyone know that, hey, we are still listening, quote unquote, listening to trade offers just to see what comes through the wire. Just to tell Trey, hey, Team X, Team Y, Team Z wants you, and this is what they're offering. But also Team X, Team Y, Team Z, they're not us. They're not potentially Super Bowl contenders. They aren't offering enough to make sure that, we are willing to part ways with you, because that's just how they do trade values. They value players to a certain compensation, but that doesn't reflect what they want to pay them in the first place. So I think it could very well be a way that they're just basically trying to add leverage back to them and take leverage away from him, saying that your options are pretty limited because these are the people that want you, and we're not willing to trade you to these other teams. So it's kind of looking like you have to accept what we want. And if I were Trey, I'd be like, I'm not buying that at all. I don't think anyone should really buy any legitimate interest in them trading Trey, considering the fact that the president of the team a month ago said we are not trading Trey. I don't think Mike Brown lies like that very often whenever he speaks in front of a microphone. I think he was being pretty truthful there. If they wanted to trade Trey, they very well could have back in March and April when it made sense to do so. Trading him now makes absolutely zero sense. So I don't buy it at all. I'm in total agreement with you.
Mike Brown, on the rare occasion that he is in front of a microphone, he chooses his words very carefully, and he knows. Doesn't this family have a law background in a lot of different ways? So I mean,
Dartmouth.
Yeah, I mean, he's not going to say that if there's not at least a really heavy emphasis on that feeling. Meaning, he's not going to say we're not trading Trey if that is truly desirable on his end. The other thing, though, John, what are you expecting to get for Trey Hendrickson at this point in the season in a trade that'll impact 2025 and positively impact your team this year? Who they want an impact player and they want a high draft pick or multiple picks if you're gonna do this, we've said this so many times. If you're gonna trade him, you got to do it before the draft. You got to do it before free agent. And this thing has just dragged out, and now there's this rumor again about a possible trade, and you go, what are you going to get a week and a half, 2 weeks, whatever it is, 2.5 weeks before the regular season? Who are you going to get that even comes close to being the impactful player that Trey Hendrickson is? That's what I don't get. At best, you're looking at high picks for future classes, and that lessens your team from a talent standpoint this year. And your Super Bowl window is supposedly open. That's what drives me nuts on this too.
It goes against everything that they've always said, which is we are not in the business of making other teams better. They would make another team better by trading away Trey Hendrickson.
100%.
They would make their own team worse. They would get potentially a younger player with maybe more contractual control. They would get a day 2 pick. It would be worse than what they could have gotten again in March and April if they were actually serious about this. And for a second, I did think that they were kind of serious until you learned that they wanted a first-round pick for a player that, again, they weren't willing to give more than just 1 year guaranteed. Makes no sense, but it's just who they are.
Yeah, and I know some people have said, well, remember the mid-year Carson Palmer trade? Different set of circumstances. Yes.
Hugh Jackson ain't walking through that door. I'll tell you that right now.
Yep, that is exactly right. So that's a whole different animal there. But in a somewhat positive note, the Bengals are seemingly addressing the question at right guard. Lucas Patrick has not looked the best since manning the starting position. I think he left early with an injury, or there was some issue going on there, maybe ineffectiveness. It's kind of been debated there a little bit, but I think it was, Jalen Rivers stepped in there, and it still has not been solidified. So the Bengals are reportedly, I think as of Tuesday, brought in Dalton Reisner for a visit. And, he has started games in the NFL at both guard positions and has been an able pass protector, which is what the Bengals need, especially with the kind of offense that they have. So he is a guy, again, this mercenary guy we've been calling for, get that 2-year deal, whatever, and potentially solidify it. But again, it sounds like old money sticking points, John.
There's a lot of things here. The reason why the Noah Fant signing was so welcoming is because the Bengals didn't have like a true desperate need at tight end when they reached out to him. And then he obviously had other interests from other teams because he was just cut, but they represented his best option. And then they made that room better without them needing to make a move. They could have signed Dalton Reisner at any point this offseason, and he would have been their best right guard from the jump. But it took Lucas Patrick being injured at the start of training camp, apparently getting injured last night, which is why Jalen Rivers had to play in for him after he gave up on the play and allowed Burrow to get sacked. Cody Ford gets injured and moves back to swing tackle. Cordell Volson dislocates his shoulder reportedly during Friday's practice. They had to wait until this entire doomed to fail right guard battle just blew up in flames just for them to call Dalton Reisner. It's like, it didn't need to take this long, and there wasn't any reports about any other visits that Dalton Reisner had before he signed up or he visited the Bengals and worked them out. There, according to Jordan Schultz, like the visit went well, and like they're going to stay in touch, and yada yada yada. Basically, the same thing as Noah Fant. And then, of course, after the visit's over, there's reports that he's going to visit the Seahawks, and also the Steelers are on his radar as well. So I don't know if that means that he's just surveying his options and seeing who wants to pay him more, but this is a dire need for the Bengals, and this is the clear, obvious fit. Someone who has experience protecting in true pass set situations on offense, someone who has a familiarity with the coaching staff. Justin Roscatti coached him with both the Broncos and the Vikings. This is where he probably belongs, but if he's trying to see where else he can go, it means that the Bengals offer is there, and they're just, again, relying on him wanting to play with Joe Burrow in a contender, which it works sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't.
Proactive versus reactive, John. We talk about that all the time with the Cincinnati Bengals, and this is I'm glad that they reacted to the situation. I am glad that they finally did that, but like you said, why did it take you through the later part of August to do this? And this is different now. I mean, Noah Fant signed, 2-3 weeks ago? So this is kind of the beginning of training camp, so he's, it's kind of like, okay, and he can weigh options. That you're getting close to week 1, and you have a big problem at right guard. This isn't 2-3 weeks ago when you could have made this call. This isn't 2-3 months ago when you made this call. You have week 1 right around the corner. And to say, okay, here's our offer. Oh, you want to go? Okay, go. And I get that there's a business side, and I understand that. And maybe Reisner goes to a couple other visits and says, hey, they equaled your offer. Or can you up it? I get all of that. But at the same time, if you're the Bengals and you recognize this as a big, big need, you probably need to come in somewhat strong on your offer and say, we can't probably let you go anywhere else at this point. And we really want you here. It didn't seem that urgency. While the urgency was there to finally bring him in after issues and injuries and things like that, the urgency to keep him in Cincinnati, not let him leave, especially with week 1 right around the corner, did not seem to be there.
And I get that they're still looking at their cap situation, assuming that Trey is going to sign. They have projections for that. Like, they know what the cap space would turn into if he were to sign right now. They have $28 million in space right now. They typically carry over about 10 to 8 every single year.
Yep.
There's room to just up the offer by $1 million or $2 million. Just why wait around? Why do the same song and dance when you just know that you're not going to need all that cap space to roll over next year? Like, especially when you don't have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson on the docket for extensions next year. It's going to be relatively boring, fingers crossed, next year, and probably all the internal moves that they make or don't make. They don't need all that cap space, and they know it. And this is just one of the times when they can just change a little bit, and it'll probably be worth it in the long run. Even if Dalton Reisner doesn't work out, it'll be a worthwhile move to just make.
Do you buy into this? What Kevin said? I thought this was an interesting just succinct comment by Kevin in the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. Do you believe that if Trey was already handled, that you would bring in Reisner and say, hey, this is it, and we're going to ink this and be done? Or do you think that this is just, again, MO of the Bengals and how they operate, especially in late free agency?
I don't buy this because, again, I think they're forecasting in terms of what the cap would be adjusted. I don't think it's going to change regardless if they guarantee more of Trey's contract. So they know what their situation looks like. Like, I know that we give them a lot of crap about not managing the cap well, but like they still have calculators there. Like they know what to do. They know what it looks like. And I don't think Trey not being signed does like impacts that.
I actually, in a maddening way, I actually do think they manage the cap well, because they're never in salary cap hell. It's just they don't, they never really spend up to it
because they're terrified
in years like this. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, but that's the latest with the Bengals on some different news, and I would love to take the air sometime in the next couple of days and tell you that both of these guys are now officially in the fold, be it long-term, short-term, but we'll see what happens with Trey Hendrickson and Dalton Reisner going forward. This is another episode of the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Believe in Cincy podcast channel and the Believe Podcast Network. It is presented in part by FOCO, the fans-only company, and FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And if it's it's number one for a reason, so you got to go check that out, especially as the regular season goes off in just a couple of weeks here. Go there and get all your bets in. Maybe put some money on the Bengals to win it all. I don't know. Do all kinds of different stuff. Maybe you could bet next week and see how much time Joe Burrow is going to play. That may be a play for you too. But at any rate, go to FanDuel.com and place some bets. We appreciate all of you tuning in live or after the fact. We're going to drop the mic and get out of here and end this episode of The Aftermath. We're going to try and do these a day or two after every game, the regular season. We are going to try and do an immediate post-game show and other stuff too, but we're in preseason mode here too, John. So we're still ironing out the kinks like we're a couple of Al Goldens. But what do you have for us on the way out of the door, my friend?
Don't want to be compared to Al Golden just yet, but I'll let that slide. Shout out to really cool reporting from WLWT's Charlie Clifford, who did a feature on Bengals safety PJ Jules, who had a really interesting offseason this year, because apparently there wasn't a single day that he wasn't at Paycor Stadium, including the days when it was practically flooded. They interviewed some security workers saying that he was here every single day. They interviewed him saying, like, this is what I want to do. Like, I'm committed to this. The son of Haitian immigrants whose dad died when he was just a young kid. His mom lives with him in Cincinnati during the season to make sure that he has everything that he needs. But a guy that I know a lot of people don't know, but someone who, if he's not going to make the active roster, he's probably going to be a practice squad candidate, someone who's kind of on track for that. So I really hope that, Saturday goes well for him when he plays a lot against the Colts, and hopefully he sticks around, because he seems like a great kid who deserves to have all the chances in the world.
Yeah, love that story. That's good stuff there. I don't have too much other than we are shaping up to potentially take the air again on Friday and may have a very special guest. I didn't even tell you this before we took the air, John. You and I have talked about this specific guest, but it's finally maybe come into fruition. We thought it was maybe going to come last week, but a little bit of a different guest, but a really, really cool opportunity, I think, if it all irons out. I don't want to tease too much, but we'll probably take the air again on Friday for one form of a show or another, but it's looking like we may have a pretty cool special guest that has some Bengal ties and all kinds of different stuff. So we will let you know about that, but keep it to CincyJungle.com and A to Z Sports, where my guy over here is killing it with the Bengals coverage for all your news, opinions, analysis. Keep it to the Believe in Cincy podcast channel for our show, Talking Football with Bengal, Jim and Friends, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach Matt Minnick and Willie Lutz. And all of it is presented to you by FOCO, the fans only company, and America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. Take care, everybody. We will be back, and we will see you soon.